if you're a petrol head, and unless you've been living under a rock, you will know that the McLaren Artura Spider has been announced this week. Now, what I'm not going to do is go through a whole intro to the car, because everyone seems to be doing that, but I did want to kind of do a bit of a opinion thing on it, I guess is probably the best way to describe it, and my own spin. Okay, so here we go. So specs wise, it is going to be a 3-litre V6 twin turbo hybrid, blah blah blah. Puts out 690 horsepower. That is 20 more than the Coupe that is currently out, but McLaren have said that you can have the map for free if you've got a Coupe. 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds, and it's going to weigh about 1,500 kilos, which, to be fair, in today's standards of car is pretty light, but McLaren does like cars, and that's what I personally love about them, and that's why I am so into the McLaren and the Lotus brand, because I'm all about lightweight kind of sports and supercars. Having said that, the rival 296 is actually only slightly heavier. I think it's about 60 kilos heavier. It's not that much, but again, I like the lightweight thing. And McLaren reckons it will do about 58.9 miles per gallon, which is mental, actually. Yeah. I can't even comprehend that number in a McLaren, but there we go. Other than that, as I said, I'm not going to reel off the press sheet because you can find that, and everyone else and his dog is doing stuff on that. I kind of wanted to do a bit more like about my thoughts on the car and where I think it's going to go, how I think it will drive, and then also what I think it will do to resale prices of the current Arturas. So first thing I will say is that it is beautiful. Do I prefer it to the 296? I do actually think the 296 is a very, very pretty car, and I almost put a deposit down on one when they came out. I spec'd up a yellow one with kind of, it was yellow, but then everything else was black. It was like, that's kind of my thing, with the yellow stitching. So the yellow and the black contrast is my spec all over, and it looked absolutely beautiful. But I think the Artura is a much more understated car than the 296, but it's still very pretty, and I can't decide which one I prefer. But yeah, it is, you can't deny it is a good looking car. How do I think it will drive? So I actually drove an Artura about, I'm going to say about 2 years ago. It's probably when this whole YouTube thing was still something that I was massively procrastinating on, and I hadn't done a video yet. So I didn't even think to do a video on it, but to be honest, it was actually really, really good to drive. I was surprised how good it was to drive. I don't really know why I was surprised, because it just felt like a McLaren, and McLarens are great to drive. I love McLarens. That's why I went from Lotus to McLaren, and then obviously I've gone back to Lotus, but still, I would have another McLaren in an absolute heartbeat. But yeah, it drove very, very well. It didn't feel heavy at all. It just, as I say, it felt like a McLaren. It's the sort of car that you can go blasting around a B road, but then also you're kind of comfortable cruising around town, posing, whatever you want to do. And, you know, it's not a horrible experience. It's not a nasty, it's a nice place to be, even if you're not hooning. I kind of feel like McLarens they're a really dailyable supercar, and the Artura is even more so. Because you, as I say, you can go blasting it around a B road and then get into town, put it into hybrid mode or put it into electric mode, and just, you know, waft along in silence, basically. And yeah, and then, as I say, come out of town, stick it back into the petrol engine, and then off you go again. So yeah, I think in terms of the Spider, as you'll probably know, use a carbon fibre monocoque, and they're very, very good at building Spiders. So the 650S and which is what I had, so the Coupe and the Spider, they basically drove exactly the same because they've got the same setup. Whereas something like an R8, the Spider version of it drives completely different to the Coupe, and I would argue that it's not as good to drive as the Coupe. The Coupe is actually a really, really, really good car to drive, and I am probably in summer, I'm going to do a review on the Gen 1 and the Gen 2, and then I'll also do a comparison. But I probably need to get a Spider in there as well to do the comparison between the Coupe and the Spider. But yeah, McLaren use the carbon fibre monocoque. They're very, very, very good at making Spiders that also drive really well. And you know, again, it's that kind of Lotus McLaren ethos where it's like they build a driver's car and then everything else around it. In terms of noise, McLarens do not make the best sounding engines. I'm sorry, they just don't. Ferraris and Lamborghinis always seem to nail that way better than McLaren do. I always found my 650S to be a bit flat, even with the sports exhaust. 765 sounds all right. It's just, it still sounds like a McLaren. McLaren just have not nailed the noise thing. And there has been quite a bit in the press about the Artura and the fact that it's apparently more refined. Now, what that means, I actually don't know, because it's not going to sound any better because it's not going to be any louder. Okay, loud doesn't always mean better. However, again, McLarens are not very good at making their engines sound good. So I'm not expecting it to sound good. Also, with the powers that be trying to eke out any kind of enjoyment that us petrol heads get from cars and driving, with noise limits and, you know, tracks and all that sort of stuff just being ripped away from us day by day because we're not allowed to enjoy driving or cars, the Artura ain't gonna sound good. I'm sorry, it's not. If it does, I will eat my jumper and I will apologise profusely on the internet to you all, but I guarantee it's not going to sound good. If it does, I will be absolutely shocked. And as I say, I will eat an item of clothing of your choosing. But having said all that, again, it's a McLaren. I am very, very keen to drive one. I would like to drive an Artura again, a coupe. If anyone's got one and wouldn't mind lending it to me for a couple of hours to drive it so that I can do a proper review on it, that would be amazing. And then once the Spider comes out again, if I can try and nab a driving one at some point, that would be amazing. There is also a load of stuff that McLaren have said that they've fixed. So the new model is essentially a facelift. It's got a load of other stuff on it. Again, I'm not going to go through it all. You can watch any of the other videos on the Artura, you can go and read any of the other articles on it, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to spend hours explaining the same thing that everyone else is. But it is essentially a facelift version, and what McLaren have done, they have made the Spider better, but then they're also making the coupes better in line with the Spider. So the old coupe, personally, I think will struggle. It's they're sitting around 150 to 160 grand at the minute, which, to be honest, is a hell of a lot of car for 160 grand. But I think it's going to get worse. I think they're going to fall in value when the new models start coming through, if I'm completely honest. But again, that just makes the proposition even better. I would be interested to know actually what kind of, if anyone's watching this and they've got an Artura, a current one, I'd be interested to know if they've had any issues and stuff like that with it, because you know what it's like with McLarens. Everyone's like, oh, McLarens are unreliable, blah, blah, blah. And I have to say, I never really had any issues with my car until it got to 40,000 miles, and then it had loads of consumable, I say loads, not that many, but I had a few little consumable issues that needed to be sorted out, and then it was fine again. And also, you kind of get electrical issues, so like it would just be a little annoyance, like I don't know, a warning light will come up, and then you leave it for a couple of minutes, reset the car, and then come back and it's fine. So I would be interested to know about actual issues with the Artura and whether they've had any real issues. I would suspect, again, knowing McLarens, it's probably more like that type of thing rather than anything major. But yeah, I do actually think that the resale values of the current coupe is it's gonna hurt it, and potentially quite badly. 720s were 160 grand odd last year. I know the market's bad at the minute, but that does feel really low. A really interesting proposition for that type of car. I wouldn't be sniffing at it, if I'm honest. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they've ironed out, what the difference between in reliability would be, and as I say, if anyone's had any real issues with the current model, I'd be interested, and it'll be interesting to see how it drives compared to the coupe. But yeah, proper stunning car. If I had that much money sitting around at the minute, I'd probably again be going and having a look at one, but I don't, so I'm not. Anyway, thank you for listening to my ramble. If you got this far, interested to know your thoughts, what you think of the car. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.